If you're watching us on YouTube, we would love for you to subscribe to Hex Education. You'll get lots of new updates and cool things about Covendom. I am Levi Rowland, and these are my incredible co-hosts, Brian Kane and Ellie Barnes. All of us are high priesthood of the Alexandrian tradition of craft. And today, as we've done for every episode of this season, we're going to have an ambush interviewer. And our ambush interviewer today is Lilith Dorsey. Lilith Dorsey, I know, I'm so excited. Lilith Dorsey is an author, a filmmaker, and a voodoo priestess. She's based here in New Orleans. She even has a book through Warlock Press, through Brian and Christian's publisher. She is a wonderful speaker, and she teaches at HexFest and many other festivals. If you follow her on social media, you will see all of these wonderful things that she participates in. So we're very excited to see what she's going to bring today, because as we've done, we do not know the questions, we do not know the topic, and we did not get to prepare.
No.
So before I pass it off, I want to let everyone know that at the end of our show, we do allow for call-ins. We love call-ins. You'll see the number on your screen. It's 309-GODDESS, 309-463-3377. So in about the last 30 minutes of the show, we open it up to calling questions. But if you're not brave enough to call in, Brian will make fun of you, but you can put your question in the chat, which will show up for us regardless of whether you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Brian Kane for our occult news.
And we'll make sure when we get to the end of the interview that we plug Lilith again and ask her where we can find her. She's written many books. I think her most recent book is the one on Orishas, but she can tell us that for sure. But she's authored several books, I think. Several. More than I can really contemplate at the moment. But amazing speaker, and we're very much looking forward to having her. So the news.
We have a news.
And so I've got three little fun tidbits. So the first one I just thought was fun, and we like to layer these little bits on. So the first one was that apparently Apple just came out with a commercial that people are, mostly the right-wing Christians, are freaking out about, because the statement they're making is that Apple is promoting nature as a pagan god. And the entire commercial is they have an actress, I can't think of her name right now, but she's funny, very funny comedian actress. And she comes on playing Mother Nature. So it's actually a very harmless, it's basically promoting some of their environmental strategies that they have. And Mother Nature's not entirely impressed, but they're trying to impress her. So I thought it was fun, but I just think it's funny how something so harmless. But it also is interesting because it does show a cultural shift that, because Apple doesn't come out and make her a goddess, but there are certainly, she is a woman, she does have powers, she's controlling the weather. They're like, how's the weather? And she's like, the weather's however I want it to be. So it was very much fun. So I thought it was funny. But anyway, check out that commercial. You could probably find it on YouTube. That's where I saw it. So I thought that was funny. So the next tidbit of information I wanted to talk about was, for all of you big fans, a new music video has come out by a band called Green Lung. I was unfamiliar of them.
Me too.
And it's called Maxine Witch Queen. And it is a tribute song about Maxine Sanders. Several people in the video are Alexandrian initiates, some of which I know. I don't know if any members of the band are or not. I couldn't speak to that, but it's an interesting video, worth checking out. I also want to point out too, it's not the first time. There's a bit of a relationship between the music industry and Alexandrian witchcraft from the very beginning. So Maxine actually was in a video and live performances by a band called Black Widow back in the day. And those were very attractive musicians. They were all very beautiful. And one of them definitely was an Alexandrian initiate. And then some of you might be familiar with a band called Incubus Succubus. Also some initiates involved in that, and it comes through in their music. And of course, we had secret initiates that we can't tell you that were in the music industry. So there's been a long, sort of fun journey there. So I think that's interesting. So it's still happening. So I thought that was interesting. And now for the pagan Facebook drama of the week.
Oh, God.
Maybe for the last 2 weeks. So, every once in a while we have to, because I don't really follow Facebook, but, I'm finding this stuff out when I find the news. I try to look up, just see what comes.
Right.
And so it came up, I think it was a few weeks ago, a man named Oberon Zell, who is known as the wizard in the magical communities. I don't know why he was doing it, but he was trying to come up with some inclusive poster for something. I don't know what it was. And so it had, and we've all seen ones like this where it'll have the pentagram and the cross and the ankh and the all the different, to try to represent all the different traditions and facets. Well, it was poorly received because there was complaints right and left about everything. So the poor man was dealing with that for weeks on end. And anyone who's been involved in these communities is looking at that, go, here they go again. There's no gratitude or for what he's trying to do. It goes into what I'm always talking about, how the fact that I think even though we're, I rail against the word community. I think we're a bunch of little countercultures that come together in this weird thing sometimes. Like there's definitely, my coven is a kind of community. The Alexandrian tradition is a kind of community, but that doesn't necessarily like make me the same thing as someone who's in, Native American shamanism or something like that. So anyway, so this continues, and now it's gotten really weird. So he kind of put that to the side, and so the next attack was about the fact that he included Hinduism in this flag and how he referred to Hindus as pagans. And so all these people were coming forward and saying, they're not pagans, they don't identify as pagans. And so he came out with some old leaders in the Hindu community who absolutely did at that time refer to themselves as pagan. And I think that there's a couple takeaways from this. One is that vocabularies in this world are ever changing. They change every 5 years. And the people changing them are usually the ill-informed, people who are actually involved in any of the traditions. And also, I'm just going to say, heterosexual white people, could you please stop trying to defend everyone? Because it's annoying and you're bad at it. We love you as our allies, but, we can defend ourselves. Just be our allies and listen to what we have to say. Me and Levi are constantly speaking for priestesses and witches and the goddess and upholding that, but it's also important to hear from a priestess and let them speak for themselves. So I think that's one takeaway. Number two is like, what does the word pagan mean? It's kind of like the word witch. It's going to mean different things to different people, and it's okay for you to have your own definition, but it's almost impossible for you to police the world because people are coming from completely different universes. Most people on this planet do not think a witch is what we think it is, what you think it is, or what anyone who's ever going to watch this. They think it's something from mythology and Halloween, and that doesn't make them right, but it certainly is a way of looking at it that exists. So anyway, that's it for the news this week. And now Ellie's going to do our Occult Minute. Yay! Demonstration.
A minute. I need more than a minute. This is the most fun I've had all year, where I get some sort of assignment to an occult demonstration, and I think in my brain, what can I do? Last night, I went to visit a dear friend who is pregnant times 9 months and 3 days, and she needed to go into labor. And so I went over to do a little bit of energy work for her, and I took a pendulum, and I said to her partner, I said, get out a pendulum and get on the floor, and let's start asking questions about her body and the baby. And it was just really natural for me to grab that tool because it's such a simple yes, no, or you're going in the right direction or you're not going in the right direction. So it made me think about pendulums, and I looked it up. A pendulum's an object or weight suspended from a pivot point. This is one that we have at Hex. It's a heavy stone, and I really like it because it is really nicely weighted, and it hangs on a single chain. And I'm going to show how I use it in just a minute. And then this is one that I've had for more than 30 years. It was a stone that my mother kicked up in a churchyard in England. It's a beautiful hagstone. And I think I got this in before Harriet was born, which was before 1993. So I put it on this leather cord. It's even got my hair stuck in it from 30 years of wearing it around my neck. And it's been my classic pendulum all my life. So pendulums, there's evidence that they were used in ancient Egypt and Greece and Rome for all kinds of things, finding lost objects, finding gold, finding water underground. Galileo saw a chandelier moving in a church ceiling and thought about the way it swung back and forth or around. He brought that back to his laboratory and invented the idea of a pendulum clock. He wasn't able to transfer the energy of the pendulum into a gear, but in 1657, a Scandinavian scientist did that and invented the first pendulum clocks. All along, witches and healers, midwives, used pendulums to find out information. Yes, no. They would hold it over a map and let it swing. Yes, I know. Yes, no. Put it over a map and let it swing in certain areas to find out where something was. You could also find gold, oil, minerals, or underground water and find a lost object or even a lost child.
What about hot men? Does it work?
Yes, it does. I'm going to show that in just a minute. Hold on.
I'm going to show that in just a minute, she says to me.
So I tease people, but I say that when my daughter was in high school, I would go in her bedroom, you know how high school girls' bedrooms are like, and find the cell phone or the math book or whatever by going in with my pendulum and holding it over piles of things. And when it started swinging wildly, I knew that was where dig down to find the math book. Religious purposes, the swinging of the censer for incense actually is an example of being a pendulum and it swinging in the right directions the way people need it to. And popular with witches for communing with spirit guides. Okay, here's my example. Here's what I want to show. Also, they protect against earthquakes. There's large systems with big, heavy pendulums in earthquake areas, and they swing.
Okay, I was about to be like...
No, really. I look it up because there's so many things about pendulums.
How they build them in Tokyo and whatnot.
It is.
I was like,
and you can get them at Hex for $12.99.
I was like, I don't think she's talking about these pendulums.
But the thing I want to focus on, and this is a story, I was doing a seance class with another fabulous psychic, and we were talking about table tipping or spirit board use. And she said, well, that's an idiomotor phenomenon. It's not really psychic. It's something that occurs when your subconscious is actually moving the table or swinging the pendulum. And at the time, I just listened to the rest of the lecture because she was so great. But then I thought, well, if it's your subconscious moving a pendulum, why isn't your subconscious communicated to by the spirit? And that it's just the way that the spirit communicates to you. So I do think we move objects with our subconscious mind. I do think we can tip tables and use the spirit board and that planchette really moves. I do think so. But I do think it is through our energetic body that it happens, but through our subconscious mind where spirit and the mind of God, I'll go that high, the mind of God, are communicating with us.
Something simple, mind of God.
So pendulums, like I said, are a weighted object. A lot of people use a wedding ring on a string or an old locket or pendant from their grandparents. I bought this one at Hex a few years ago because it's heavy and it's got a really nice hang to it, swing to it. So people hold it over their hand. I never did it that way. I put my other hand flat on the ground and put my elbow on the desk so I could get more stability. I also have a copper pyramid that's soldered together, and I can hang my pendulum in that pyramid and not touch it and get it to move by I'm asking questions. So I wonder how that idiomotor works when you're not even touching it. But I ask it what its yes motion is, and I ask it what its no motion is. So we're just going to check it. Okay, pendulum of Ellie, and I'm speaking to it with respect. This is a friend of mine. Although it's my public pendulum, I use it in seances, and lots of people touch it that I don't know. Pendulum of Ellie, tool of the witch. Thank you for working with me today. Please come to rest. Please show me the yes response. Can you guys see that in the camera, that it's moving back and forth towards my face? This is my normal yes. Although some pendulums do different motions. That's why you should really check your pendulum over and over until you're sure what it's doing. Pendulum of Ellie, come to rest. And please show me the no response. It's swinging kind of at a funny angle, but it definitely went in a different direction. And then, of course, it can swirl counterclockwise or clockwise, and some people have opposite experiences. Yes is the other direction, and no is the coming towards you or going away. But I do think it's important to use it a few days in a row to test it and see which way it works best for you. I keep my pendulums in a little velvet bag in the dark. And this is my personal pendulum. Like I said, I've had it for 30 years, and I can see through it into the future. I don't let other people touch this, except maybe high priesthood. But this one is public, and I let people touch it, and we use it in seances. So get a pendulum, get a notebook, and start thinking about taking it outside and looking for ley lines, looking for water, looking for coins or something else underground. Take it with you to sacred sites and see what it's showing you as you're walking around Stonehenge. A few times in England, my daughter and I would each take a pendulum and walk in straight lines, like at the Rollright Stones. We were there by ourselves. We walked in a straight line, and both of our pendulums would start swinging wildly as we crossed a certain spot. And we just kind of stood there and talked to that genus loci and said, thank you for acknowledging us, strangers that are here in your land. And see what kind of work you can do with the pendulum. Clean it with smoke. Don't put salt water on it. If you've had it out and about or other people have touched it, or you just feel like you've accumulated a little bit of residual energy on it, light a charcoal and put on a little dab of frankincense, and then something really bright like a lemongrass or bergamot mint, and a drop of lavender oil, and let that form a nice smoke, and then swing your pendulum through the smoke. Thank it for its service. Thank you for working with me. You're beautiful. I love you. And then put them back in my bag. But get a pendulum, tie one up, buy one online. It doesn't matter. Once you start using it with your own hands, it becomes magical and powerful. That's my demonstration.
This
Thank
message
you.
was brought to you by Coca-Cola.
I keep and I've got a Dr. Pepper. We're so bad.
All right,
So
it's
I'm going
time.
to use it today when we're answering questions. Yes, no, maybe.
Okay, we're going to bring on Lilith. And here she is. We're so happy to have you here, Lilith. Oh, you're muted.
Have to unmute yourself.
Unmuted. Oh no,
There you
I'm
go.
not unmuted. I was
I-
trying to I was trying to say thanks for that lovely pendulum information. I think that's great. I use a pendulum every day. And the other thing I wanted to say was, did you ever think about the hanged man as being like a human pendulum?
Mm-hmm. Wow, no, not until you just thought about it. But
Okay. Yeah.
Swing back and forth.
so then immediately my psychic brain saw a little upside down poppet tied by one leg to ask the fate of a victim. Love it. And I'll
Everybody
hold that over
needs a
smoke.
hobby.
Right?
All right, Lilith, we're dying to know what is the topic of this ambush interview.
Okay, all right. I love ambushing people, so this is fantastic. I could have been weirder, but I probably couldn't have been witchier. So, all right, here we go. Mine is all about media, as in film and television. So,
Ooh, that's a good one.
I'm a
We've
not done
filmmaker.
that. Yeah.
And I think so many of us out here, our age, younger than us, older than us, like we get these images in our head from such an early age. So I'm going to start with, what's your favorite witchy or occult movie or television show?
Okay.
Who do you want to ask first?
Levi.
Ooh, okay. I really do love the original Wicker Man. I think that's a classic. I think it's kind of lovely, very British, very, pagan horror. I liked A24's The Witch because it was subversive in a way. It had a very lovely subversive ending. My favorite witchy things are anything that I think subverts it so that it's not in someone's head. That's a popular thing to do, where at the end it's like they're just crazy or whatever. So I love it where everybody thinks they're crazy and then at the end it's all real. Ooh. Like in The Witch, where you think she's mentally ill, but in the end it's really just the devil. So I love anything like that. So I like A24's The Witch and The Wicker Man. Those are probably two of my big ones.
Nice.
All right, Brian.
I have to, there's so many, but I have to give it a toss-up between The Dark Secret of Harvest Home by Betty Davis.
So
which,
good.
although it isn't technically about witchcraft, if you know anything about the mythology of the craft, definitely is. And then the other one is an old movie called The Devil Rides Out, which is a amazing, fun, kitschy film. But I love so many witchcraft films. So
That is a great TV series you mentioned, though, with Betty Davis, and like it was one of their last roles before she died, too.
If he wants to see,
right. I
let
haven't
him
thought about
see.
that forever.
And it ties into today's topic because I think his name's Thomas Triton, the man who wrote the novel. He was a famous Hollywood actor. He was a leading man who left Hollywood to become a novelist, and that's who wrote Harvest Home, and it got turned into a miniseries.
It's a great series.
It is so good.
Is it my turn?
Yes, it's your turn.
I need to say something that's going to make me cry. I'm going to fail at this interview in every way because I didn't grow up with a television. I never watched television. I've only seen 7 movies in my entire life. I don't like going to theaters, and I don't read too much fiction, and I have zero knowledge
I
of
forgot.
anything.
This is like your worst nightmare.
It is. I really don't know anything.
It's like a try. Do your best.
So all I can say is I did watch Bell, Book, and Candle, which was a black and white,
Okay, see?
really
Classic,
old,
yeah.
something, and I watched that probably on YouTube or Netflix. And I watched a little bit of Bewitched when I would go to my grandparents' house in the summer.
You know what that John?
That's it.
That's good,
that's
though.
probably it.
That's
okay,
an answer.
See, so you did, though.
A little bit, yep.
That makes me think of Bed Knobs and Broomsticks. Remember with
Yes.
Angela Lansbury?
But see, I just smile when people start talking about
Bell, Book, and
actors.
Candle is also one of my favorite.
Yeah,
movies.
it's pretty, but people start talking about stuff today all the time. Oh, a show, a personality, a musician. I'm just like, zero idea. I just smile and nod like, oh, yeah, I know. I don't know any of it. I know zero of it.
You're going to do great. We believe in you.
All right. I believe in me too.
You're going to do great. It's fine. It's good. Yeah. All right. This is fantastic. Well, this works. I'll throw in of any sort for Ellie so she can have her moment about this. But you already mentioned Betty Davis, Brian. Is that your favorite star?
In that film, yes. I love Kim Novak in Bell, Book, and Candle. I thought she did an amazing job. She's like my, kind of quintessential witch, really. I think it has to be there. The Devil Rides Out. I think it's Vincent Price is the kind of the star in that one. He's the protagonist of the film. But yeah, there have been so many good films and actors. But yeah, those would be some of my favorites.
Do you think it shaped any of you, do you think it shaped your idea of what it is to be a witch? I mean, even Ellie, you said you saw Bewitched when you were growing up a couple of times.
Yep.
I feel like for me, that was a moment of, okay, it didn't have to be the Wizard of Oz, evil, drop a house on you. There could be a good witch. There could be somebody who was like a mom and your neighbor and helping you. So do you think that do you think those early things, like all the movies you mentioned are kind of old. So do you think those early things shaped what you thought it was to be a witch or to be an occult practitioner, and how?
Ellie, go first.
Okay. I watched a little bit of I Dream of Jeannie, right? Mm-hmm. And that lady and the other lady that played in
Barbara
Bewitched.
She's trying.
Barbara Eden.
Both were
Elizabeth Montgomery. Yeah.
Barbara Eden and Elizabeth Montgomery.
both were blonde with nice big boobies, and I feel like that was good for me.
Your entire image of I want to be a witch is I just want to be like pert.
Yeah.
Pert is
Just
the word.
and just adorable, and blonde and kind of a little bit blinky eyed. I liked that blonde image for me. It worked for me. That's what I am.
Lilith, I think it does actually influence me really heavily in one particular way. And I'm guessing maybe you can relate to this on some level. When you're part of an actual tradition and you care about it, you almost are in this weird opposition sometimes to mass media, where you're having to correct stereotypes so much, or you're having to correct false presumptions that people have about witchcraft, or voodoo or any particular tradition when they come into it because of what they've seen through mass media. And so that is a way that I do think it actually influences me a lot, especially amongst younger people seeking initiation, is they come with an enormous amount of knowledge that is really a collection of social media memes or movie clips that they've seen that they really enjoy. And they're so obsessed with a very particular aesthetic of witchcraft or aesthetic of voodoo. And it's so I almost think it does affect me in a different way, in the way of having to be against it.
Well, they always say life imitates art, right? So I think mythologies have been influencing human beings since the beginning of time, and media is a modern conduit of that. So when I think about the films that I watched, I'm sure something like Bewitched would have been more influential on my mind, because some of my favorite movies actually didn't see till later. You know, I didn't grow up in the era where Devil Ride came out, so I watched that later. Same with Dark Secret of Harvest Home. Those were all films I watched later that I just really appreciated because I could see things in there that I thought were taken from history or accurate mythology, and then some of it was just fun, right? I mean, now that I'm kind of channeling a little Kim Novak right now as we speak.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
So I loved her, and I think the one thing I'd say with Bewitched and like a movie like Bell, Book and Candle is I sort of retain that idea that magic can be fun. It doesn't always have to be a serious thing. We usually approach it as something in need or something that is very serious and tragic. But sometimes it can be fun, and they certainly, bring out that trickster of the witch, and I think when you're a teenager, you're more apt to do it. But occasionally, I might curse someone that their Uber driver might speak to them,
Such a vile curse.
Good fun, right? So sometimes it's okay to be naughty. So I'm sure there have been some aesthetic influences and things like that. But at the same time, the writers go into great detail. I mean, some of these writers actually do research, even though it translates differently into the film. I know one of my big awakenings was when American Horror Story Coven, when the writers were going around New Orleans talking to people that I knew and people in our shops, and some of the story that came out about Coven reflected real events and real people that I knew that was going on in real life. The connection between Salem and New Orleans that they made in that show. The necromantic character known as Misty Day. I don't think they thought my husband was going to be as good on film as she was, because they really, I think, took a couple. I'm convinced that my husband and Carrie Ewers were the inspiration for the creation of that character.
Misty Day.
Yes, because she was working. And Carrie has that whole what's her name, the musician
Stevie Nicks.
Yeah, Carrie has that whole Stevie Nicks thing. They made the character look a bit like Carrie. And then they've got Christian's name mixed in there, and all these things. So they created these characters. If you watch the film again, one of the Supremes they put on the wall, she's just a painting, is Mimi. They call her Mimi, and she looks like the Mimi from Esoterica in New Orleans. Like, they really went around and did this. So that's always been going on. Sometimes there are real incantations and things like that found on film, whether there should be or not. Mm-hmm. So, I do think it has an impact. I'd like to think that if you're serious on the path of magic, that you will transcend that and not stay in the realm of delusion. But inspiring the imagination is always healthy, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Yeah. And I think,
yeah, definitely. Like, okay, so I guess this is kind of associated with that particular answer, but I know some of us have been interviewed, some of us have been in documentaries, some of us have seen documentaries. What do you think they get right, and what do you think they get wrong?
I think, that's hard, because it can go one of two ways. It really depends on intent of the filmmaker. And sometimes they're not always honest about what the intent is. There is a little bit of sleight of hand that happens, or a little bit of dishonesty that you can smell in some of these projects. And that always makes me a little antsy. So, you'll go do something and it's to talk about witchcraft, but in reality it's for some ghost hunting show or whatever, where they just want you to be a caricature. A prop, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that my answer would be that it all boils down for intent. I think they get it right when they approach these as real religions. I think the danger in filmmaking around non-traditional spiritualities in the Western world, under the shadow of Christendom, is to treat them as weird hobbies that people have. This one person loves to get a lot of tattoos on their face, and this other person knits dead bodies, and this other person's a witch. It's like, and those are all equivalent. You know what I mean?
Same TV show.
Those are equivalent. Same TV show, right? They're equated.
Sounds like the pagan community.
I I know, right? You're not wrong. But what I like is when a documentary, and this does happen, like Taboo kind of did this on Nat Geo and a couple other places where it's like, I mean, they still have to make everything spooky and play the silly music, but I think it's appropriate when a voodoo priest or a voodoo priestess, and then a contemporary witch priest or priestess, and then a Christian minister, and then a Jewish rabbi, and that they're on a level of equality. Like when I've seen that done, I love that because it's like it's the same stage, the same communication, the same reality. But I will admit, I think that's rare. I think normally it's seen as you're an opening act for the real religions.
An oddity.
Right. You're the opening act for the real religions. We're going to talk to the Archbishop of Canterbury later, or we're going to talk to, the leader of a mega church in Dallas. But you're the fun amuse-bouche before the meal of real religion. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm so adamant all the time on this show of like using words like religion. My favorite line ever that I use all the time is I'm not spiritual, I'm religious. And I kind of want to.
Good for you.
I love that phrase because I'm like, we're a religion. Like, and Lilith isn't a religion. And we own that vocabulary as much as the Abrahamic faiths. And that's what I would like to see in documentary filmmaking around non-traditional spiritual paths is like reclaim the language of belief. Like it does not belong to the Nazarene and his fan club.
I just will say from my own experience, I've been on 3 or 4 TV shows where people contact me, the producers, and they say, we want to film a psychic doing X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. And so they're always adorable people. They don't know a lot about witchcraft, magic, psychic activities. And so they're always really nice to me. And they say things like, how long have you been doing this? Where do you live? What do you do in your free time? And I can just tell they don't really know a lot about what they're about to film. And then I know that I'm there all day reading and filming and doing whatever mediumship or investigation or prophecy and for hours, and then they cut it all down to like 3 minutes of
and the weirdest thing you said,
and cutesy witch stuff, and I'm like, they just didn't really pass on any of the brilliance that I delivered that day, But adorable, I guess I'm pretty cute on that. But
you are adorable, Ellie.
it just always seems so synthetic and popular, and just trying to get viewers. So it never really strikes me as very deep. But I guess I would watch documentaries that I think are really good and that are historic and deep, but not too much on popular presentation. I think it's too shallow.
Well, I've done quite a lot at this point in time, not quite as much as my husband or Lilith, but I've been on MTV and the Travel Channel a few times and some other things that made it kind of big. But that doesn't compare to the many shoots I've done that went nowhere. And the people who are very disrespectful of your time, and the fact that you're doing it for free, or you're letting them into your house or your shop or whatever, they can be very disrespectful. And you start to get a sense of it. You start to be able to recognize the ones that are going to be like that, and they're kind of douchey in a weird way. But you kind of have to get through it anyway.
You're not wrong.
There have been some brilliant ones, but there was, I think we signed something, but I think I could say this much. Me and Levi and Carrie and Christian went to do one that did make it somewhere, and we were in the woods, and the whole thing was quite clearly they're trying to get some sort of shock value out of it, and I didn't play their game, so they had this little setup, and they were like, does this look like it's a satanic altar? And I knew it wasn't a satanic altar. It was very obvious these people were trying to make something happen that wasn't. So I very cleverly said, no, this looks like some kids were inspired by a Metallica cover. But when it actually aired, they said, does this look like a satanic altar? And I go, absolutely.
Yes, that's that's the edit. Absolutely.
Literally changed my answer. I would never work with those people. I did 2 filmings with them. One made it and one didn't. But I wouldn't ever work with them again, because that's the problem, is they can do that sort of thing to you sometimes. And that's, this is too important to me to be misrepresented, or to make me look completely stupid, because anyone who would have thought that was a satanic altar would be really bizarre. Like, the Laurens, is that their names? The weird doll people that made stuff up, the haunted house people. I can't think. Ed Warren. The Warrens.
The Warrens, yeah.
The Warrens would have thought this looked stupid. Like they would have been like, "There's nothing here. We got to go now." There wasn't anything.
That's beautiful.
Which is weird because when we were up there was this weird building that had like a slaughtered deer in it that looked like it was slaughtered real weird. And I was like, why don't you do that if I was the thing? But, you know,
it was rural Louisiana. It was just dinner.
I've talked to Lilith about this before. I very much would like to do a project someday where we do our own documentary and go around New Orleans if somebody else doesn't do it, or even, you know, I've got to get Christian on board. Yeah. Well, Lilith's the director, you know, she's got the thing to do it. But I think something very serious, even if it was just put on YouTube, I think that has a lot of mileage. A lot of people really watch documentaries on YouTube, and it's a really good medium. I did one recently with a very famous actress who I didn't know, and they got put on something less than YouTube, you know, and I thought, well, you're not that great, really, are you? But
the judgment.
Anyway, that's my answer, if I answered it.
You did.
No, that would have been my next question. If I gave you $500,000 to make the movie, what would it be? You know, what would you want to see in it?
A serious documentary, you know, with, you know, I think if it was going to be in Salem, I would make it all probably about my coven there. But if it was going to be here, I think I would want to make it diverse because that is New Orleans, and I'd want to have a coven, a voodoo house, you know, maybe, you know, an OTO lodge, or these different serious initiatory groups that do exist here. And I don't know, that just sounds like a great storyline to me. I think that's something a lot of people would want to watch.
What would you make, Ellie, with that much money?
Years ago, I had a lot of chickens in my backyard in Florida, and I had one big chicken named Lucky, and he was the biggest male bird in the yard, and I wanted to glue a little tiny camera to his head and call it Chicken Cam. And I wanted to put cameras on the back of my sunroom, which could film the backyard, and then Lucky would have the little camera glued to his head because
this could actually be its own YouTube
this
channel.
This would be an amazing YouTube show.
And that was even before YouTube, and I was like, I think I could make $1 million. People would pay me 15 cents to watch these chickens for 1 minute. Especially Lucky, like aiming towards one of the hens, and you could see him picking up speed and starting to make noise, and then he just smacks into him and flops him flat down on the ground, and they go, "Hey!" So what I would make,
this is crazy.
I know what I would make is
chicken rape,
is Witchcom, where you are walking around at Hex, me and the other psychics and all the weirdo people that come in there and the crazy questions we get asked at the desk. I would do a comedy. I would do a glued to your head camera comedy of our lives in New Orleans.
Of reading?
All of it.
All of it. Our real lives are quite a comedy.
Could you imagine a point of view documentary of just the people who?
Oh, that would be amazing.
Just the day, you know, that you get with.
So Ellie's saying we should all have cameras attached to our heads.
Yeah. We'll get GoPros. It'll be great.
Yes, we can see all the public and the chickens
for the interim,
the tourists and the questions we get, and just this is, you know, Lilith, this town is unusual.
It's special. It's very special.
And there's a lot
of
stuff.
It is. And it's special all day long. We got a rooster that it was under my house for a while waking me up, and then it was under my neighbor's. And I went out and I saw my neighbor, and he's like, yeah, we chased it around the other morning. I had a machete, and the big redheaded white guy next door had an axe. And then after about a half hour, they're like, we better stop this. This does not look good. The black guy and the white guy chasing this chicken down the street at 6 a.m.
Were they going to kill the poor chicken? Is it driving everyone crazy? So they're just died.
It is. It doesn't shut up all day, and it goes under our houses. It's terrible. Dinner.
I just can't
get
over the GoPro chicken documentary idea called Big Lucky.
Big Lucky.
That's what we're going to call it. Big Lucky.
Big Lucky.
I love it.
Big Lucky's Day in the Sun.
Yes. I'd love to see a more. I think it can be serious and fun. You know, I mean, that's what this show is. It's we always try to make it fun, but the topics are actually, you know, somewhat serious in nature, you know, that we talk about things that actually really matter to people in a religious context, you know, including this. This is a super fun. Me and Levi did one years ago about pop culture. So it's kind of similar, and it was one of the favorites. But the stuff that comes out, really, it's real life, you know, how are our religions are treated as novelties. And I think both voodoo and witchcraft leaders know how to use that to grab a microphone and say something important. Right.
Yeah, definitely. And I hope there's more of that. This is why I chose this topic, because I think that there's really been a shift where we as witches or occult people are making our own media, are doing shows like this, are putting like the truth out there in a entertaining way. And we don't necessarily, sorry, Hollywood, we don't necessarily always need Hollywood, to come and tell our stories anymore. And I think that's one of the good things that I can think that has happened in the past 20 or 30 years. There's not that much that I think has improved over the past 20 or 30 years, but that's one of the things.
It is a blessing that we're able to get content out, but then there's the dark side of anyone can.
That's true.
Yep.
Right.
And we have to contend with that too.
Yeah, definitely. Well, those are my questions.
Oh, goodness. All right. So I think we're going to sort of open up to having Lilith on the panel and have our own Discord. So you can call in now. Am I doing your job? I don't know.
It's fine either way.
309
the numbers on the screen.
Goddess. I'm a Virgo rising Taurian Cancer control freak. 309 Goddess. If you want to call in with questions, or we'll start asking your questions in the chat. That we do love it when you call in, because Levi loves to answer the phone.
So he says.
And I can see the questions and the calls this week because I'm here. When I was doing it in New Orleans, I couldn't see anything.
In Salem. I enjoyed hiding
Salem,
things from
sorry,
you
I
when
don't
you
know
were
where
in
I am.
Salem. I enjoy hiding things from Brian. I will
He
say,
does. He hides things on here if he thinks it's something he doesn't want me to talk about.
That's true.
Like if he thinks it's too controversial, he'll spin past it.
I'll just spin past it.
Because he knows I'll
go
go anywhere, really.
You'll go way too far.
Yeah.
When you brought this topic up, Lilith, I had this thing in my mind where I'm like, I know for a fact we're going to get 3, 4, 5 comments about the craft, and they did not disappoint. It is always, anytime you talk about witchcraft in movies and a certain generation is on the chat, it's always the craft.
It was there.
It was. I don't know if that's a question.
Can I just say, I love Rachel. I just have to say that every time she comes up. I've done a couple of events with her now, and she's just a lovely person, and I hope she comes back to New Orleans soon.
She's going to be on WitchCon next year. Yeah.
She's teaching.
Yeah.
And I've met her only once, though. We went to Potions and hung out. Yeah. Which was cool.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I liked the craft. I mean,
the first one.
You didn't like the remake?
No, it was like a woke nightmare.
I'm getting tired of remakes, to be honest.
This is when I just smile and nod
It's a
because I don't know
bad
what they're
remake,
talking
though.
about.
Just bad. It's bad.
I will tell you, if I didn't answer the question about what movie I would make. I don't think you should ever give me money to make a movie. It'd be the most dour, weird.
Levi, you can't make a movie. You have to just be writing poetry.
I know it would be some dour art film.
No, an art film. I could see you doing.
Like
I'll go.
I
Just
used
be
to
like the goddess with someone throwing blood on her.
Since it would be. It would just be
people
somebody
crying,
like getting a tarabalium,
nuclear bombs going off.
Yeah. It's God's will.
Holy Mountain.
Yeah, Holy Mountain, exactly. That's my jam, Jodorowsky. But I used to play this game, and Lilith, I think you would approve of this, where you have a background in filmmaking. I was a French major, and I had to take a ton of classes on French film, and you know how annoying they can be. And we used to play this game called Boom, Credits Roll, which is when you're watching an art film, particularly if it's European, you pick the most, like an hour and a half in, you start to pick the most just asinine point in the movie where nothing has been answered, the plot makes no sense, and you just go, boom, credits roll. And eventually one of you will be right. Like where it's like nothing has been resolved, there is no coherent ending, and you just go, boom, credits roll. And I promise you, if you start playing at home with European art films, you'll win every time.
So that's great. I want to play
this. You and your
this.
husband do on Saturday night?
No, it's not. So Ian had a question. So what do you think it's worded in the chat as like, what do you think Gen Z's TV magic influence will be? But I'm going to broaden this a little.
I get confused about which gen is.
Gen Z is young right now. They're right after millennials, but still they're at the
like
age
the people I date young, or people I could get in trouble for dating?
You'd get in trouble for most of them.
Get in trouble.
I can't keep track of the generation.
But I'm going to broaden this in, what do you think the general influence of like social media content in terms of like TikTok, where it's short, where you have such a short amount of time, and reels on Facebook and on shorts on YouTube, they're called many different things, but it's really all the same kind of
I think we have to encourage them to read books And I think we have to encourage them to look for their content elsewhere. I think some of those are nice jumping off points, and some of them are horrible jumping off points. But yeah, they're being trained to take their information in small increments. And there are a lot of people who create, or content creators, who are jumping on board with that, because I've even told Christian this, because it's true, even though I'm not that generation. My husband can write the longest Facebook posts that you've ever seen.
Novels.
I can't be bothered to read them, and he's my husband. Because I'm like, does anyone actually read this whole thing? And it's just this enormous, chapter, really. So I've told him, if you really want to get people's attention, you've got to make it, if it's a post, make it like a paragraph or something.
Shelby has a great question.
Didn't create change, but yeah.
So, Lilith, what do you think about Gen Z and TikTok and its influence?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say let other people.
Well, I mean, geez, I don't even think my daughter's Gen Z, but I think that what I do hear them talking about, especially recently, is things like the new Sabrina Teenage Witch, is things like some of these, the Love Witch, things like that have really come out in the past 10 years. I think they might have grown up with other things, either the earlier Sabrina, which my daughter did grow up with, or Willow on Buffy and things like that, where they've got this sort of televisual thing. And I think the reason I bring that up is because, I'm Gen X. We grew up with no parents and nobody paying attention.
I think that we might
whatever.
be the same generation.
You're Gen X, Brian.
I thought so.
Yeah.
Same, yeah. My parents were at home. The cartoons were the babysitter.
Yeah, that's what I mean, for most of us. So I think that, there was, and even now the kids never put their screens down. So I think that those are influences. I think they're definitely more familiar with a positive way of the witch. But I think also this thing you're talking about, the short format, before we went into the pandemic, the studies were somebody needs to see something 7 or 8 times in order to retain it. So a post, an ad, hear a fact. After 7 or 8 times, then they'll remember it. Now, just after the pandemic, it's up to 11 times is the average people need to see it or hear it before they retain it. So that's really changed our mental capacity in the past 3 years.
That mental retardation.
Brian, no, we didn't.
Yes, we did. We did.
Well, we're slower. I mean, I don't know if that's the PC word, but we're slower than we were, definitely.
If somebody had to be told something 12 times, there was something mentally defunct about them. It's not.
I just need one time.
Behavior.
I have a great idea about this. I don't know what my generation is. I don't know what my generation is, but I don't know what my generation is. But
what year were you born in?
1964.
You're either the tail end of the boomers, the very beginning of Gen X.
I think I'm boomer. But
you're boomer in personality.
We listened to records. I know I've told this story before. My brother and I had a record player in the hallway between our 2 bedrooms, and we went to the public library and checked out records on mythology or storytelling, like Carl Sandburg. I mean, we just listened to these stories during the day, like after kindergarten. And then I did grow up with people that lived or had property in a rural setting, and we would often go out to what was called the farm on weekends, and we always had some sort of family gathering where people told family stories and just ghost stories, and it created such a value for my internal world, developing and seeing and sensing what my own mind was creating out of
Like your family had like ritual plays over the campfire.
They did. We even did one of those.
I've met her family. I absolutely.
believe
that's
this.
great.
It was bohemian.
It was
to
bohemian.
The fullest.
They were. My parents were like
this.
bohemian intelligentsia, but it created such great skills inside my own brain to imagine, to see color, to feel flavor, to build character development all internally without the visual. Like I said, I did not grow up with television. Radio, yes. Record players, yes. We saw television as cousins when we would stay at my grandparents' house in the summer, and that probably started in like 1975.
Were they your less intelligent cousins?
Everyone was less intelligent than I, Brian. Yes.
I have to tell you, Ellie, your daughter is in the chat, and her only comment was, "Rest in peace, Lucky."
I know. Harriet.
Harriet's in the chat. Rest in peace, Lucky.
Harriet saw Lucky. Lucky did good.
I ran into Harriet recently in Salem, and I'm invited her to dinner spur of the moment. She's like, well, I can't. I'm on my way to a drum circle. And I said, that's such a Barnes thing to say.
It is.
On my
It
way
is.
to a drum circle.
Oh, I love that.
Shelby has an excellent question I would love to ask the whole panel, which is, what in each of your opinions is the worst visual depiction of witchcraft or voodoo that you've ever seen in media? That's a good one.
I can't answer it. I don't know.
Do you have one, Lilith?
There's a blaxploitation movie called Sugar Hill that's about like pimps and like voodoo sex workers and all of this. That's pretty bad. Pretty bad. Sugar Hill.
Sugar Hill.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'll look it up
A
now.
lot of those
right?
blaxploitation films are rough to get through now. What is that one? Is it Trucker John? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's the one about the
No.
madam. It has that amazing scene in it where she's kicking one of the hoes out of the house. And I'm not using this language disrespectfully. It's the language of the film, right? And she's. I mean, I've got to
I
put
know
a
what you're
caveat
talking
here.
about. I
But
think
it's an amazing blaxploitation film from the 70s where she's like, and I'm going to say a vulgar word, so forgive me, but she goes, "Those two bitches that left better learn how to sell pussy in Iceland because they ain't never coming here again because we a family." And it's one of my favorite film lines of all time. It is just a terrible 70s movie.
That's beautiful.
It is beautiful
I love it.
screenwriting.
I have to,
Yes.
I don't really get too hung up on the negative stuff because I realize it's Hollywood and all that sort of thing. But I guess so I don't get on my bandwagon too much about it. But I suppose horror films that make the witch the evil murderer possessed by a demon and, always worshiping Satan. I mean, I can be a bit, fun with it. Like The Devil Rides Out, they're absolutely worshiping the devil in that movie, but they make him look like Pan, so it's fine. And also they have good robes. So, I mean, there's places where I'll bend, but the sort of misinformation that basically feeds the propaganda that we're evil is probably, it's so rife I couldn't pick one. It's all over the place.
So
Yeah.
your worldview is, I'm fine with Satanism as long as it's not tacky.
As long as they have good robes. As long as they have good robes.
Good
Good
haircut.
ropes.
I don't want it to be tacky.
I do carry on the British witchcraft teaching that our God looks like the devil. So therefore there's a bit of a crossover, and that's true in history, and church mythology. So it happening in movies, if it's done right, so The Devil Rides Out, like, it's not anything from the Bible. It straight up looks like Pan. And what they're doing in the ritual is dancing around, drinking wine, getting naked, being crazy, getting ready to have an orgy. It wasn't anything biblical. So it's sort of
Just a good time.
kind of seemed like a Tuesday
People
night
having
to
a good
me.
time, not a self
Yeah.
site.
Tuesday night.
You know what? I'm going to give like a terrible answer for this. My least favorite depictions of witchcraft are when they try to make witchcraft sweet. So like The Good Witch on the Lifetime Network.
I've never watched that because it's just so
I
Lifetime.
won't watch any of that stuff because like I would rather them think we're Satanists. I'm like, I don't want to be associated with this. Like I own a dried flower store in Rhode Island and I just make potions.
So you didn't
I was like, I'd rather you just be a Satanist.
Did you hate Practical Magic?
Kind of. No, I can't say I hated it.
I thought that was a cute movie.
It's not my fave. I don't like it where witchcraft is sweet.
At least they it wasn't completely sweet. Get the book, get the bird. They did stuff.
Yeah, they tried to bring that like weird Czech
They
cowboy
sacrificed
back
a
from
bird and they
yeah.
made a zombie.
That's
So it
true.
wasn't
I lived in
com-
Rhode Island and made potions. But anyway.
I don't think you were doing it like the people on Lifetime Channel, Lilith. I feel like
I've never watched The Good Witch.
I don't know. I just don't want us to seem hokey. Like I'd rather us seem evil than hokey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of hokey reality shows
Yeah.
too. I remember we were competing to be in a reality show with another voodoo group, and we lost out to somebody who had a rather colorful drag queen, and they went down to the river and they whipped the river with a bullwhip and cursed it.
Oh my God.
So I was like,
They cursed
we're
the
never going to
river?
be that entertaining.
No.
My
No,
last
that's just
documentary, I didn't
sacrilegious.
lose out. I made the documentary, but we sort of lost out to a group of fat women. And there was just so much
So
of them to
hateful.
see. It was, but it was true. And that's why they didn't even make YouTube status, because the producers were dumb.
He was so mean.
What was great about the fat women? Why were they picked? Just because they were
Because there were...
snacking a lot?
I will not participate in this. I will not participate
okay, so
in this.
I'm not fat shaming. I'm just saying if you're a producer, this looked like a pagan float parade in this ritual that these women were all in. I think they picked it because there was a big group of them and they did have a nice area, whereas our shots were more discreet and there were only a couple of us, because this is when I first got the house. And so there were only a couple of us. So I think they thought it was going to make better film, but I would have made better film by myself waving a sword in the air. It was just not good. It wasn't a good choice, I don't think. But, producers make their choices and sometimes they don't make the best ones.
See, I'm a totally different headspace about this question, about Shelby's question. I want us to be wronged. Like, I feel like I'm tired of everything my entire religion being available at TJ Maxx. Like, I want it to go back to where, I don't know, it's a weird, dark,
It should be available at Ginny Craig.
You know, it's like, you hateful.
That is good, Brian. That is
I'm
really
sorry,
good.
I'm naughty.
I said that to somebody recently, this whole thing, and they were like, so you want us to be like, shamed or whatever? And I was like, yes, that'll make us worthy of the goddess's love.
It is what it is, but when it's sort of strange when you have an entire group of people that clearly, have low self-esteem.
Here's a great question in the chat that Ellie might apply to you. I know you say you don't read a ton of fiction, but I know you have. And for the whole panel,
she's probably listened to movies and records.
Yeah. Is there any representation of witchcraft or voodoo in fiction that you really enjoyed?
Could be a book or a record. Or Shakespeare.
No, there's
a
not.
hand puppet play that you watched at your parents' outdoor theater.
I liked
A fairy tale.
I liked I, Claudius. Was there witches in that?
Oh no, but I'll consider that a pagan
that was
novel,
on
right?
That was on what, PBS? Like we
PBS,
had Rabbit
Careful.
Ear.
It's Robert Graves who
Rabbit-
wrote
yes.
the novel, who wrote The White Goddess.
Yeah.
But here's what's coming into my brain psychically that I want to say. And for years, always all of us were probably attended some gatherings and saw some ceremonies and rituals. And if we weren't participating, we were looking from the outside of the circle. And then in our own working, and we all know how powerful ritual work really is on the astral and how much we're in our psychic mind and how powerful the things are that happen to us in ritual. There's no way film and writing can document that internal world. And so I can really see the schism of what is presented and what we experience as, for me, vastly different. And I don't think there's a way to really get that internal experience across unless you abduct them and bring them into the cave with you and make them do the ritual with you.
All in good time.
Okay, good.
All right, everyone. The number is 309 Goddess. If you're brave, call
This
in
voice
and let us hear your voice tonight.
Oh, sweet
Very
little
comfortable.
Harriet's watching. You can call us Harriet.
Harry Rat, call in Harry Rat.
She can say,
Dr. Bombay.
Oh my God. Lilith, do you have a depiction of witchcraft or voodoo in fiction that you love?
I didn't answer my favorite movie, so I could do that.
Do your movie and fiction. Take it both.
I would say film. I would say Eve's Bayou, and I think that anybody who's an African traditional practitioner, I love Daughters of the Dust, but I think that's a little too art film for some people. It's an amazing film and I love Julie Dash. And I think you really do get the feeling of being in one of those ancestral ceremony rituals and stuff from the film, because it is experimental, like you were saying, Ellie, that you can't get it through normal. I think if you go experimental and work on sound and visuals that are non-traditional, that can put you in a similar space to being in ritual, not exactly the same, but similar. And I think she does that in Eve's Bayou by going back to the water. You know what I mean? We're talking about the Louisiana Bayou. We're talking about the magic and the mystery that can be held in the swamps. And, we all know here in New Orleans what that's like. And I think she does a beautiful job of that. And also showing that magic that you have when you're young and you make a wish and it comes true, and all the joy and all the fear that can come with that as well. So that's my favorite, probably.
Is that a modern film? What year is it? 80s, 90s?
Eve's Bayou, 86, 87.
Okay, I'll definitely look it up.
Yeah. What about fiction?
Yeah.
No, I want to ask.
Samuel L. Jackson.
What do you think of the
yeah.
movie Midnight of Garden of Good and Evil?
Garden of Good and Evil.
Yeah, sorry.
I mean, I'm sad I never met Lady Chablis. I have a friend in common with Christian who was good friends with her. So I'm sad about that. I haven't spent, obviously, as much time in that city as I have here, but I do like that sort of mysterious things in the middle of the night kind of energy, and I think wrapped up into Southern racism and all those other kinds of issues that come into it that we see in the film. I like that. And we all know some weird, strange, very well-dressed person that does psychic readings somewhere and is always right. Hopefully it's us sometimes.
Hopefully. Brian, what about you for fiction?
For fiction,
Like a book.
that you don't like or that you do
No,
like?
you do.
there was a book I read, but I can't remember what it was called. That's the problem.
I read a book once. I didn't care for it.
No, I don't read a lot of fiction. I don't read a lot of fiction, and I never have read a lot of
No,
fiction.
me
But there
neither.
was a book on witchcraft that I did read in my teens, and I cannot remember what it was called. But it was a book where it was a very racy book. This brother and a sister join a coven. Somebody might know of it if I tell you what it is. So they join a coven. And it's kind of weird because they're brother and sister, but they become incestuous in the book, and the coven's like cool with it because love is love.
Oh.
But they're good witches in the book, right? And then some bad witch comes, and all this stuff happens. Well, one of them ends up betraying their secrets, and so the coven just sort of like kicks them out and then moves out of the town, and they basically spend the rest of their life wishing that they wouldn't have messed up because they never found that happiness again. And I think one of the twins died. That's all I remember.
Wow. What a
See, I
book.
read a ton of fiction. I'm a huge reader. I think I actually really like Harvest Home. Oddly enough, it is a little bit of a sort of dime store, suspensey kind of horror novel, but it's actually really enjoyable, and it has
It draws very heavily on the agricultural.
and it's actually kind of good. I enjoyed it quite a bit. My favorite novel that I ever
They
did
came to
anything like,
see.
because
Let him see.
Harriet asked about sort of positive representations of voodoo. I don't think Harriet would mind if I expanded that beyond just voodoo to like other African diasporic traditions.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite novel I read that was about African traditional religion was actually by the famous Brazilian author Jorge Amado. He wrote a book called Tent of Miracles, which is about candomblé. And the main character is a candomblé practitioner, and it's a huge part of the novel's progression, and it's an exploration of sort of the spirit of the racial divide in Brazil. Brazil being one of the most racially segregated places historically, with the most like incredible demarcation of race. I mean, there's like so many words in Portuguese for like how white you are, basically, whether or not you're European white or kind of not fully European, you know what I mean? And it's just a beautiful, I highly recommend it if you're looking for, anybody who's in the comments looking for something like that, it's a beautiful novel. But Tent of Miracles by Jorge Amado.
So
Yeah,
once
he's
again-
a priest actually, and didn't he win like the Pulitzer or something for that? I feel like he won some huge literary award.
Oh, he's
for
won
that,
a ton of
so.
literary. He's like one of the most
Like a
well-known
Catholic
Brazilian
priest?
authors. No, a priest.
No,
of
like a
candomblé.
candomblé priest.
Oh, I see. All right, yeah.
Yeah, he's initiated. So even though it's fiction, most of what you're going to see in there is really, actual
Authentic.
kinds of
Amado-
stuff
Love
you'd see in
that.
ceremony.
Amado's a big deal.
Yeah.
In Brazilian.
I love that one. I love War of the Saints. That's one of my favorite, where the statues start walking around. I could totally see that happening in New Orleans. Like the
Not opposed.
statues
I
come
think
to
they
life.
do at night.
Not
I think I
opposed.
saw one outside my house recently. If you guys would like to call in with any questions for the group about witchcraft, voodoo, magic, New Orleans, what we do on Sundays, the number is
Yeah,
309 Goddess. Come in, ask us a question. That's what the phones are for.
What else would I recommend? I'd recommend Ishmael Reed for voodoo stuff.
Okay.
He's got a real good handle on it, I think. I mean, again, it's a classic. He's been around since, Harlem Renaissance and forward. So no longer with us, but
You
I think...
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. Finish, Lou.
No, it's fine. Go ahead, Levi.
I think there's like a half delay.
There's a small delay.
Yeah, there's because I can share this, something that I think is hilarious, and it's something that Maxine does when she's asked like what book should I read. I don't know if she does this anymore, but it was like what book should I read, and people are expecting her to name like some nonfiction book written by a witchcraft elder. She tells them to read Dune.
Yes, she does. Yeah.
Like, that's what she tells
She
them
says
to
Dune
read.
will teach you more about Alexandrian priestesses than any other book that's ever been written.
It's Dune, of all books.
I don't know. I've heard
That's
of it. But I don't know
wonderful.
anything
That's what
about
she
it.
tells people is to
What's
read
in
Dune.
it? What's in Dune?
It's a
It's been
sci-fi
a Jesuit
space opera.
sisterhood is what's in it.
With a
The
very...
ones who have a breeding program for their male offspring,
Yep.
or the offspring of others. It's a great book for real
The spice.
occultism. Yeah, well, it's also the metaphors, and some of these books and fictions, they contain real occult information, and they're inspiring, and they inspire the imagination. The imagination is a very magical tool, so we're not poo-pooing on that, and I think that's what makes this topic really great, is because these movies and TV shows are a form of storytelling, and they can inspire.
We do have a caller.
Yeah.
You want me to answer?
Well, yeah, that's
You
your
ready?
job.
Wow, so hateful to me he is, Lilith. So hateful to me he is.
Blessed be.
Blessed be. Hi, you're on Covendom. Can you hear me?
Hello? Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can. What's your name?
Hi, my name is Kenya,
Nice
and
to meet you.
I want to say hi to Lilith. Kenya Tikoviak. And the second thing I had a question
Kenya.
on her opinion. Hi. I have a question. I want to know your opinion on the influence of the diaspora on hoodoo, especially under the fact that right now we're having a reverse Great Migration. How are we seeing changes in hoodoo, not saying voodoo, but in hoodoo, in your opinion?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. Thank you for
Sorry.
calling in, Kenya. It's been too long. Definitely. I think in a way it's just become, I want to say, because of the state of the state, right? Because of the Black Lives Matter movement, because it's finally, at ahead of this is the time where I think a lot of people are not accepting the status quo about things, that hoodoo has become a lot more insular, a lot more guarded, a lot more people are gatekeeping it, which I think was something that was never in existence to the state that it is right now. So I think that has pluses and minuses on both sides. And I think part of the problem, too, with the commercialization of it, which is more than it ever was before, because, again, right, I was just talking about Ishmael Reed, and I could go on talking about Zora Neale Hurston and stuff. And, when they wrote about hoodoo in the 30s, 40s, 50s, it was not as well known. They were writing fiction. And now we've got everybody's an expert about these things. And I think part of the beauty of hoodoo was that it was a tradition that was passed down in families. It was passed down in communities from elders to students. And it was very heavily based on, this is the herbs that grow here. These are the plants that grow here. These are the sacred natural magics and medicines we have to literally fix whatever it is that's wrong with our life. So if I am, my neighbor's a big pervert and he's trying to get in my house and rape me at night, then I know that if I take this herb and this root and I stab it with this and I shove it under his house, then maybe he'll leave me alone. Maybe he'll die, but either way, he'll leave me alone. So that's good. So I think there's a way in which this commodification and selling of it can't be done, shouldn't be done, and isn't really going to be effective if it is, because it's going to be really highly based on, this is what's growing in your yard, this is what your grandmama or the old lady down the road told you to use, and this is what's going to work in this specific time and space of where we are at that moment. So it's not necessarily information that can translate, and I'm really sad about these people that are selling it wholesale all over the place, because I think it's going to be, just by the nature of the tradition, it's going to be ineffectual a lot of the time, and that's sad.
So one of the things that I've noticed, Lilith and caller, because I don't know how much we'll chime in, but I've got something I could say about it, because we do run stores, and I've moved here in 2012. So I've seen, in New Orleans at least, and I think being a bookseller, I've seen the trend change greatly. Like, I saw the rise of the hoodoo trend. Just like I've seen the rise and fall of different other magical trends. It happens, right? And I'm sure Lilith has seen this throughout her journeys as well. and it changed greatly from the time I came here. The way people talk about it then and the way people talk about it now, it has changed greatly. From my periphery, hoodoo is a particular kind of folk magic, which is exactly what Lilith's saying, the magic of the people. In some areas, people call their folk magic conjure. In some areas, they have different terminologies for it. In some areas, they don't have any. In Ireland, when you're looking at folk magic, it's often going to be very Catholic, but it's still coming from the land and the people there. It's not coming from the Catholic Church. You go down to Mexico, same thing, magic of the people. And I know people, without naming names, who now have tried to create a closed practice around this thing that just a few years ago had the very real understanding and narrative that it was folk magic and not folk magic from DC. So just saying. But I respect it. I think if you live in New Orleans or anywhere, particularly New Orleans or magical places in the South, it doesn't seem to matter what tradition you practice. If you practice magic, you're going to pick up a little folk magic from your local area. It may be one or two things. It might just be making cabbage and black-eyed peas on New Year's Day. Mm-hmm. That might be it. But we all pick up on our local genii. I guess.
Yeah. I think that's true. But that was a great question. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenya.
Thank you, Kenya.
I just want to ask a follow-up question about that, Kenya and Lilith. Do you think then hoodoo as folk magic is becoming too watered down or too much from books, and we're really losing the history of people passing it on? Is that what you're saying? Or that it's getting stronger and more solid?
Do you really want me to answer that question?
I do, because I don't know, and I would
go for it.
I would tend to think.
We'll bend the rules tonight.
Answer it, Ken.
Yeah, I would like to hear it.
Okay, so first of all, let me preface this by saying I do not proclaim to be a professional two-head woman, professional root doctor, nor do I profess to be an authority, be-all, end-all on the study of hoodoo in a scholarly fashion. I want to throw that out there first of all. So if they want to come for me, I'm not sending for them. But here's what I believe is happening right now. I do believe that the reverse Great Migration that's happening right now, as well as, I will say cross-fertilization, I don't want to say cross-contamination, even though that might be my opinion, with the new second generation of immigrants from Africa and the West Indies that have settled here and made their home. And we embrace them, of course, because, hey, this is one big world. But the beliefs are beginning to crisscross over. And with the yearning of our young people to try to make everything as possibly closed as they can, because we so desperately want something that's just our own, and I'm using the collective we, I think what's happening is knowledge is being lost, knowledge is being polluted. And just like you said, in certain areas, Lilith, it is really, to me, it's a regional thing about what is growing in my yard, what's growing in that person's yard, were you told at what point in your life to do in a certain situation. I think what's happening, we're losing the defining traditional or hereditary, and I'm not saying it's closed, which I do believe most of it is, but you're losing the hereditary inner teachings and getting the collective merchandiser teachings. And then those are being moved from place to place because we're taking what we learned in Chicago and taking it to the Carolinas, and the Carolinas already have what they do, okay? And now you're trying to mix them together, and the subsequent generations are kind of a little confused. And I'm just going to say it here. If I don't say it anywhere else, I'm just going to spill the tea right now.
God.
When I wrote that chapter in the book for Llewellyn, you will notice, and no, I'm not plugging the book, although I always do plug myself, being honest, but you will notice I don't give away any closed or rather lesser-known secrets. I give 3 spells, and we talk about the traditions around it. But I was very, very careful because some things run through family lines. I'm not telling you can't use it. I'm just saying some things are familial. When we have this disconnect with this this drift of migration, familial practices are disappearing. And the reasons for those familial practices seem to be disappearing, and then we're adopting, quote-unquote, strange gods and strange practices and pulling them into a practice where they don't belong when we move. But that's just my opinion. And betting 25 cents will get you a gumball.
That answer your question.
Always nice hearing from you, Kenya. Thank you for
Thank you so
calling
much,
in.
Kenya.
Yes, and I think also that happened a lot with witchcraft. I think of it as very localized, 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago. It must have been very particular for each region based on their weather and their
Well, all the regions
mountains
had their
and
own
plants.
cults, really.
But then
didn't they?
after
Yeah.
people started writing about all the different styles of witchcraft, Celtic, Italian, Egyptian, etc.,
It's called Llewellyn.
and creating a tradition around absolutely everything, and then people read 3 or 4 books, they put it all together, and they don't really have a system from a place. They don't have a system
Well,
from
I think
a family.
any of us who've written books, read books, all that sort of stuff, there was a point in time with the oversaturation. It probably is true now, because I don't read a lot of books on witchcraft anymore. I'm more interested in the historians and the anthropologists at this point in time. Once in a while, a witchcraft author will come up with something that interests me, but I've been reading witchcraft books since I was in my teens, which was just a few years ago.
So recent.
It starts just repeating itself
Right.
and repeating itself
Right.
and repeating itself. And I think a lot of what you get in, voodoo is a religion, right? And I very much promote that whenever I talk about it because I know it to be true. Whereas you're talking about these other things, they're not always religious in nature. They're cultural or geography or whatever like that. But a lot of it's the botanicals, really, isn't it, Liv? The botanicals that have been going on for a while, and it's regurgitated. And it is a mixture of European stuff and ATRs and Brazilian and all this stuff. But it's the main botanicals are all doing the same things, and that's just kind of continued in a different sort of way, I think.
Yeah, but if you look at the history of it, if we look at the ATRs, there were people going back even, in the late 1600s, there were people going from this side, this hemisphere, back to Africa to make sure they had cascarilla, to make sure they had these other herbs and the knowledge of the plants that only were grown over there. One of my favorite things, we have a lily here called the crinum lily, which, people used to put it in their hair and in their pants or whatnot when they were enslaved and being forcibly taken from Africa and brought over here. And now you can see them all over Louisiana. But what do? They're poisonous. So it's a very pretty flower. But if I'm going to grab something and I'm being forcibly taken over here and I can only grab one thing, I'm going to grab something that's poison because I'm being uprooted from my, native land. I'm being taken from my family. I'm being, enslaved, literally, raped, beaten, all the rest of it. So I hope I had a crinum lily in my head, and I hope I fed it to some bastard, honestly. But fast forward all these years over here, now it's interesting you're talking about plants, and, now that I'm the gardener for Jazz Fest, I know I don't put it in my bio because there's too many things, but Jazz Fest here in New Orleans, people ask me. But when I'm working with native plants, and it's funny how many people think something is native, or, they see it all over. Oh, this is a weed in my garden. It must be native. So even the things that are growing around you now, some of them could be native. Some of them could be wild. You could get attacked by red ants. That's not native to anywhere over here. So there's a changing over time, both, botanically and situationally and magically. But I think there's also, like Kenya was saying, it was a familial thing. I know in my family, if we're sick, we eat garlic and ginger and horseradish and those kinds of things. And I pretty much know that'll work for my daughter. I know it'll work for my sister, anybody in my family line, because we have the same kind of DNA roughly, and we're used to eating the same things and doing the same things. So that's the danger, I think, though, when people are like, oh my gosh, I'm in this situation. This is a life or death situation. And I open this book and this person said, use this herb, and maybe it'll work, maybe it won't.
Do you want to know a really weird thing I always think about? I probably will think about it for the rest of my life. So when we were sick, my grandmother would give us a spoonful of mentholatum to eat.
Like
Wow.
like
I don't
Vicks
think you're
Vapor Rub?
supposed. Yes, I
I think
don't.
you're supposed to eat that.
You're not. You're not supposed to eat it, and it worked. I can just tell you, it worked. I don't know if they've changed what's gone in it, but yeah, we'd eat it, and you'd wake up. You go to sleep, and you wake up feeling better.
Well, you'd have to be well after that.
Well, you can buy edible camphor.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you can,
It
but
may
we have
be
an Indian
different
store
now
here.
than it was when I was a kid. I don't know, but it was mentholatum.
We do have another call.
Yeah.
Oh, yay. Love that topic, though, you guys. Beautiful.
Yes, it was awesome. Hi, is this Jennifer?
Yes, it is.
Hi, Jennifer.
How are you guys?
Question? Doing well.
So, what's your question for the group?
My question is, do you guys work with deities and specifically Hecate?
Well, I'll start with that. Yes and no, and yes.
Very clear. Perfectly clear.
We're all three Alexandrians. Lilith will have a different answer probably. I would assume, maybe not. We believe that all goddesses are one goddess, essentially. So some of us might be drawn to that Greek image of her more than others, but it's not a requirement. We do in our tradition have particular names and secret names that belong to our tradition that we use to express. But we believe that our goddess is, basically expressed in all female divine figures. If you guys want to add to that. Yeah.
You go ahead, Lilith.
Okay, I was going to say for me, I would probably say no and yes, but for a different reason than you just said, because we sort of follow the concept of Ashe, which is a sacred energy that is in all things. So I might honor the goddess of the cemetery or the goddess that has dogs with her all the time or the other attributes that people sort of associate with Hecate, but not specifically Hecate. So in a way, I feel like I'm honoring that energy, but from my own tradition.
What about you, Ellie?
I will be certainly venerate gods. Hecate was early in my life on those records of the Greek myths, so I think she was probably one of the first goddesses that I thought about with witchcraft and goddesses. They come and go. They come and go. I'll just say in parts of my life, for instance, when I was pregnant and had a young child, then I gravitated more towards the mother goddesses as opposed to the older goddesses or the virgin goddesses. And I think that they come to me during different circumstances in my life when I need their particular energy. And I agree with Lilith. There certainly are these themes of energy that a goddess from a different culture could still be part of. And you might worship that energy, but in a different guise or different outfit.
I feel like our lighting has changed. Is it just me?
It's just you.
Okay, I don't know.
I would say, Jennifer.
My light went out.
Oh, it's because it's getting darker, probably.
Yeah, it's probably getting darker
that's what
outside.
it is.
That's what happens. You
We're
can tell he
catching
doesn't
on.
leave the house a
That's
lot,
what
does he?
happens.
We're catching on. It's getting
What's
dark
this
outside.
thing happening in nature?
I'm usually not up in the sun.
I've not been outside in daylight in 16 years. Jennifer, I would say this is going to be a weird answer, I think, from a lot of us, because as initiates, I don't think, as Alexandrian initiates, we don't really have a lot of relationship to hard polytheistic paganism. It's just kind of foreign to the original teachings. There are initiates who speak as polytheists a little bit more than I think we would.
We call them the untrained.
But they exist now, unfortunately, right? But I would say, I do actually enjoy images of Hecate. My favorite incarnation of her is Hecate Sotera, which is a version of Hecate found in the Chaldean oracles, where she's a sort of supreme universalistic goddess who is the medium through which the divine mind is communicated to the world, right? She's a true cosmic deity in the Chaldean oracles. So I've done work with that image, but I'm not really interested in, when I'm interested in a particular deity, it's as a window. I would say the closest living religion outside of our own that shares our philosophy is Hinduism. Is most schools, because Hinduism is incredibly diverse. Most schools of Hinduism are monistic, like Advaita Vedanta and whatnot, that believe that, all of the faces of God are really just doorways to the same absolute truth, the sort of cosmic soul, the Brahman. So I would say we're much more similar to that than something polytheistic.
And with that kind of idea, I suppose a way we could express that is all of these are faces. Human art, since the whole part of this show is to start out with kind of talking about modern human art, modern human storytelling. Human art that is expressed through divine religious experience. You know, that's how we got these beautiful statues and these beautiful poems and these beautiful invocations and all of these things that we do and traditions that are carried on. They're expressions of how God, goddess, speaks to us as individuals. So even though there's millions of faces of God, they're not all talking to me. Only certain images, only certain conversations are happening in that way because, well, I'm only, you know, I'm not a million faces. I'm not a million ears, you know. So I can see my goddess in every female divine being. However, that doesn't mean that's what comes to me in my personal walk.
Yeah.
You know, and it's even different with the God because I can't see even though we have that belief, I have a hard time seeing my God in Jesus. But that's due to cultural experiences. I know that my God is in Jesus because Jesus is the shepherd. Just
the sun God, right?
Yeah,
right.
all
the
those
sacrifice.
things. But I don't personally relate to it and find it, you know, like I don't, you know, Christianity is its own religion, so therefore Hinduism is its own religion. I don't go actively seeking Shiva. But if I went to a temple of Shiva, I could definitely find God there.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense. Yeah.
But thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah.
Levi,
Thank you.
I want to ask you, Levi, why do you think there are all these doorways to one goddess? Is it cultural and artistic? Is that what you think
I think
also?
it's the diversity of human beings.
Yeah, okay.
You know, I was just watching a show last night that I think it's called Thought 40 or Thought 42 or something. It's this English guy. He's kind of cute. He's got a bit of a wonky eye, but I don't know why I think he's kind of cute.
Love wonky eyes.
And he's cute though, and but he's always doing these like, you know, editorial things, and he's talking about the whole thing was actually about incest is how it started out. But
This is a theme with you tonight.
It is.
Weirdly
It's
enough,
incest
it's, you know,
tonight.
just
Cersei
bringing on the
Lannister
real
over here.
Egyptian thing going on here. Well, the punch of it was he was like, we're all inbred because technically speaking, if you go mathematically, if you do the math about how many humans are alive today, and you do your own math, the math doesn't add up. Because you start out with 2 parents, and then you've got 4 grandparents, and you've got 8 grandparents, and it keeps magnifying. If you did that, you'd have more ancestors than humans have ever lived, which means there was a lot of this thing going on, and we don't know how nature really made it work to where we can be this way now. But to call a spade, we all have the same ancestors. All of us have the same ancestors. Now, as Alexandrians, we are not a cultural religion. So we believe in reincarnation. Some of those cultural issues don't matter as much to us, so that we don't reach out. If we were cultural, we would be British, which isn't really that old, is it? All right, sorry. Tangent.
It's not that old. No, it's not, actually.
Yeah.
It's like they think they are, but no, it's quite
So
young.
you answer that question, please, Levi. Why do we have all these doorways to the goddess? What's the reason for that?
Well, it depends on who you ask. I really like certain Hindu philosophers' answers where they talk about, there's a thing in Shakti Hinduism, which is what I'm fascinated with, which is the goddess-centric branch of Hinduism. It's very popular in southern India, and it's also very popular in West Bengal. And they are, you know, fanatically devoted to the goddess. I mean, this is a religion that views the goddess as the underlying reality of all existence. They call her Devi, which literally just means goddess, right? And it's just the feminine of the word God,
right?
And it's
Sanskrit.
related to the word devil.
And it's related to the word devil. It's related to the word divine. It's related to all of that. But in their views, the goddess has an aspect to her that is called Maya, and Maya exists in a lot of dharmic religions. But in Shakti Hinduism, because it literally means illusion, right? It's or a magic trick. Like in the Vedic text, it can be a magic trick.
Wow.
And so part of the Maya of the great goddess is that she desires to create so much that she will trick herself and reality into believing that it is separated, because it's this hunger for separation so that it can come back. So it's the hunger for experience. And so the goddess takes the form of Maya or acts through Maya, depending on the tradition. They're very, very contradictory depending on what school you read, so I don't want to paint with broad brushes. But this idea that the goddess is constantly pulsing out and emanating creation. And the only way to do that is kind of to lie to your creation a little bit, right? Because if your creation realizes that it's you, then you've created no separation, right? So the veil of illusion is created, and that's going to proliferate through all culture, time, space, planets, worlds, universes, etc. And then our work, the great spiritual work, is to return to the unity, right? So that's kind of like, that's the framework that I like.
Maybe like an actor who's going to go into their closet and pick their
Yes.
clothing and hair, wig and makeup so that they come on stage portraying someone else, but trying to really connect the audience back
Well,
to
think
the
about it
source.
like this. So if you look to the Torah or the Bible, right, which most people are familiar with, it says God made man in his own image, right? So if we're taking that as a philosophical, catch, look at human beings, how diverse we are. Male, female, shape, size, sometimes all of the in-betweens. We're diverse in our personalities and our desires and how we act and
Part
our
alien.
attitudes. Part alien. If we are a mirror of the gods, look how diverse we are. So,
Oh, I love that.
like if we were going to be a pantheon, the four of us right now, like who would be what? I'm definitely, I'm gonna give Lilith. Oh God, what would I?
Who are we giving Lilith?
Lilith, that'd be her. That's
right
what
now.
her
I'll
name
give her
is.
Sekhmet. I'm gonna give her Sekhmet.
I was like, oh, why can't I be Lilith?
Right. That's what I thought.
Lilith is a good one.
That's too obvious. No, because I see you as a lion goddess of Africa. Yeah.
In 2,000 years, we are going to be a pantheon.
Yeah.
People are going to pull out these archives and say, look at back in the day when the
So
gods talked.
who would we give Levi? What god
God.
would Levi be?
Nothing good.
No, it could be something good. It's got to be something very like Thoth. I'm being
Thoth?
very
That's
Egyptian
cute.
today. Sorry.
That's cute.
Thoth. Or we could give you Hermes Trismegistus. That's probably a good one.
With the beard and the emerald
Yeah,
tablet.
totally philosophical.
No.
Just like feeling bad about like you're arguing with God.
I want to give Ellie like Inanna.
Inanna would be good.
Like that old world deity of like.
She's like, I've come to
She's the
hell.
one with all the
I'm not
boobies?
sure why.
No, that's Artemis of Ephesus. But I think in like some goddess who's kind of like, I will bless your crops, but also every 7 years you have to kill all your children. Like one of those one of those deities that just has that
Definitely.
very infernal kind of like. It's
Nice on the outside, but really not on the inside.
Not
Hey,
on
I'll
the
go for that.
outside.
yeah, I'll give you one of
With
those.
my
like,
hair, we
celestial
just
ones.
have to give me Apollo.
I was
today.
going to say,
Well, then
Brian's
it
got
makes
to be
sense.
Lucifer.
Amon-Ra
Brian be
or
Lucifer.
Apollo.
A gay guy with a harp running around with. He doesn't know whether he's going to use the bow or the harp. He doesn't know.
It's a harp. So I'm going to go through the chat real quick. We also had a call that got dropped. Remember, if you call in, guys, to use the screener, so that 'cause you can't do a blocked number. That is something where you don't you got to tell us.
Because we want to be able to call you back.
Yes. So I did lose one there. So if you call back, I will totally answer. You just got to do the screener. It's part of the process.
It's a troll avoiding technique, so we don't get people calling us.
Yeah, and I think it'll just get lost in the sauce if you don't. Sorry, I'm scrolling back. We had questions.
I thought you said there is a call.
No,
No,
we lost a call.
we lost one because they didn't. Something with the screener was off.
Hi, Magic's Aid. I was going to say that I thought
What?
about that as somebody mentioned it in the chat as a great witch fiction that I did read.
See?
It's not that great though. It's historically
Well,
great. It's horribly
Right,
written.
right. But
Yeah,
You're not wrong.
historically it's
once,
great. But yeah.
once I learned about it,
It's
I
like
bought
good in the beginning because it's sort of revealing some sort of craft ideas, and then it's almost like he got bored of writing it, and it turns into a little kid's end of the story.
Yeah.
And then there was a castle, and everyone fought, and He-Man won. Power of Grayskull. It's really is. It really is.
I have one that came to me that I'm interested in because actually Lilith mentioned it earlier. You mentioned when Ellie was talking about not watching a lot of movies or whatever, the power of fairy tales and folk tales, like sort of like the power they carry, and they're reincarnated 1,000 times, and like there's so many modern movies that are just the retelling of the same folk
Right,
story, right,
right,
over and over
right.
again. Some sort of hero's journey, or it's Snow White 4.0, or whatever.
Hero of 1,000
Yep.
faces.
Yeah, right. Or it's the Anansi tales from Africa, just like
like that
restructured
weird
over and over
movie
again.
where Snow White like fights with a sword.
Snow White and the Huntsman.
That's so
Yeah.
bizarre.
No, the only thing bizarre about that movie is we're supposed to believe that Kristen Stewart is more beautiful than Charlize Theron, which is just ridiculous. That's just like nobody's watching that movie and going, "Look at that Kristen Stewart. She's so much gorgeous than Charlize Theron at her height." Like, Oscar winner Charlize Theron. We all make mistakes. Whenever I'm in a bad mood, Lilith, I remind myself, like if I do something really awful or I screw up royally, I always just look at the mirror and I go, "It's okay. Judi Dench was in the Chronicles of Riddick. We all make mistakes. And that's like what I tell
Very
myself.
true.
Oh, but my question anyway. Do you think there is something about fairy tales or folk tales, regardless of culture, because I know fairy tale has a very Eurocentric connotation, but like about the negativity they used to have that we've whitewashed out that you miss? Mm-hmm. Like if you go back and read a lot of those original ones, they're
they're all
grim.
There's no happy endings.
They're very grim.
Yeah,
Right? They're very
grim.
dark.
Yeah.
And
And
then
they're
everyone
warnings.
dies. Yeah.
Do you think that there's a sort of like danger in the toxic positivity
I think
of
it's very
taking
American.
our culture or taking our stories and trying to make them more palatable? And that relates to earlier when we talked about, like, I joked about hating witchcraft movies that made it too sweet, but we'll start with Lilith. Like, do you think there is a danger in sort of removing the negative so much?
Yeah, I definitely think there is. In my book, Water Magic, I talk about all the different fairy tales about water, and it's really clear to me, especially looking at them, hundreds of them cross-culturally, that the reason we told kids there was Nessie in the water or Jenny Green Teeth or whatever was spooky in there was water's dangerous.
Yeah.
We don't want our toddlers going over there and falling in, Sometimes adults don't come out in one piece either. So I think that it just sort of allowed us to have a world, even when we were little, where we would understand that bad stuff happens. And I think, again, this is my not popular opinion, but I think that there are dangerous things in the world. We live in New Orleans. We're the murder capital of the world here, I mean, should we Pollyanna it all? It's all going to be wonderful. No, it's not. Bad stuff can happen, and you have to be careful. My favorite story when I was a kid was about this kid who wasn't supposed to go around the corner, and it was called Mr. Miyaka, and he would go around the corner, and the guy would steal him and take him home and, threaten to chop off his legs and eat him, and, kind of like Hansel and Gretel, but, more city-fied. Just don't go around the corner where you can't see your parents, but I think that that's an important lesson. There are dangerous things around the corner, and I think we need to learn that in a safe way, and that's what these stories do for us.
Yeah. I think it's also like oddly spiritually poisonous too. Like somebody in the comments mentioned, a lot of people grow up expecting life to be fair because of media, or because of the stories they've been told. Whereas our ancestors were told very different stories, right? Stories of like, no, this is not all going to work out for you every time. And you better be clever and you better be quick and you better be smart or you are not going to make it out alive.
Or the idea that if you're good, God loves you and nothing bad will happen to you.
Yeah.
I just think that's ridiculous. You've got to face the negatives.
Little, we lived in a place called Reardon, which was a rural country farming community, and there was an abandoned house on our, if you want to call it a block, dirt road, right? There was an abandoned old house, and our parents didn't want us to go in there because it was dangerous. And we were country kids; we'd run around all the place. We never went in that house because they told us the Reardon Ripper used to live there, and we thought Reardon Ripper was a real thing.
Yeah,
and no one knew what happened to him, but he lived in that house. So
we had Hamp Lawson.
Scared of that house.
We had some old guy around the corner named Hamp Lawson, and he was a child eater. And so
it's always a child
my grandfather
ogre.
would tell me and my brother and my cousins, Hamp Lawson lives on the other side of this neighborhood. We know how to get over there if you guys are bad. And we had fabricated incredible stories about Hamp Lawson, and we were terrified of him.
Yeah. Do you ever think, though, that, like, I often think about how mentally healing those darker stories can be because they help you deal with grief, they help you deal with suffering on, like, this very psychological level. I mean, one of the things that I think shocks people when they think they know the stories of a religion or they think they know the stories of a spiritual tradition is they'll go read them and they'll, like, for example, Celtic lore is horrible for this. Like, if you start reading Celtic lore, it's non-linear because they were meant to be sung, not read. It makes no sense. Everybody dies multiple times, and they're alive in one story and dead in the next, and then they're alive in another world in a different time period because the lines don't matter. And it's kind of bleak. It's quite fatalistic, the whole concept of the geesh, the taboo and all that. Or if you read, like...
So in a way, still very British.
Still very British, very dour.
Who do you think you are? You're going
like
to die.
Hasidic folktales. Some of the darkest stories sometimes, of from Poland and from, the Hasidim. But we kept those alive because they taught you something, and I think there's just this danger sometimes in storytelling now where it's like,
I think
everybody's an individual libertine hero.
Don't you think just like everything else, America controls a lot of these things now?
Oh God, yeah.
And our culture is very, it is very sugarcoating.
Spoiled and entitled, and people start to pout when something doesn't go their way.
Do you think parents still do you think teachers and parents still tell children they could be president someday?
Yeah.
Yeah.
None of you can.
Oh, yeah.
Not unless you're related to one now.
No, I think there's all of that. I blame Disney, honestly. My daughter and I, we went to the Leprechaun Museum in Dublin, and they told us there that Disney bought up all the early fairy lore and texts, all the early leprechaun texts. Like, he owns more of that sacred Celtic magical fairy stuff than anybody else in the world. Locked it up and turned it into what we see now today, Tinkerbell and all of those kinds of things.
Crazy.
Sad.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's cool to look at, think about.
But I think, like, if you're practicing any kind of religious tradition, I'm always amazed, I guess, because I don't run into a lot of love and light people. I think those people avoid me.
I don't like them.
I think they avoid me, though. Like, I have a reputation.
Oh, except I'm Love and
Like,
Light. I forgot. I'm Love and Light. Oh, crap.
I
But
think
I don't
Love
like
and
them.
Light.
You only play it on TV.
No, right?
Yeah.
Love and light avoid me.
Both of us, I think. I don't think Love and Light people.
Do you know what I said one time, and I've said this a million times, so I know it's repetitive if you watch the show a lot, but I still reiterate it, talking about movies, taking it back, look at me.
Are you married to Love and Light?
No.
Is he secretly mean?
No, Patrick's a Buddhist.
But he sees so nice.
He's, okay.
That's what I'm asking.
Keep that alive.
Is there secretly a little evil thing in there? I don't know.
He can be sharp when he needs to be, but he's very sweet. But I often joke that scene in that terrible Keanu Reeves movie, Constantine, where Tilda Swinton is having a full nervous breakdown, and she just goes, "I will make you worthy of God's love."
Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
That is my goal as a teacher, is to just have that crazed, psychotic, religious fanatic aura at all times. Like, where
did you get that from?
And I wonder, right? Like, that's my greatest thing. I will make you worthy of God's love. It's like, we're all gonna bleed for her tonight. I think we need more of that. I think that's my answer.
That we don't have a whole lot of topic questions in here. I'm going to try to see if I can find one. People aren't asking. I think people don't know what we are tonight, Lilith. I think they're like, we're just entertaining. They don't know. They don't know what's happening.
Well, today's world, so many people are seeing their occult studies on YouTube, on their laptop, I guess on TV. It's just a whole different world. It's just a different world, and it's very watered down, I think, and very popularized. And I'm sad to run into people every day coming into the shop asking questions that I just think, where did they get this information? And they're all getting it from YouTube and online sources that are, I don't know, we just not very authoritative, and it's very stressful for me to watch people.
Encourage them to read books. Read books.
Well, do your research, cross-read and counter-check,
or solid documentaries too.
Solid documentaries, absolutely.
Absolutely.
They're great ones, which I like. But I think it's stressful to see.
I always tell people, and I will beat this drum in my next life probably. Find out their credentials, find out where they came from.
Yes.
Anyone in the occult world or in religious communities, they have a history. They're connected to people that are a part of that history. Lilith is a part of the New Orleans Voodoo Temple here with Priestess Miriam. There's a history, and I'm sure she's got histories I don't know about, but there's a history that even though I'm not involved, I can gauge that there's a history going on there. She worked with a man named Dr. John here, who I didn't have the pleasure of knowing, but I know who he is because I live in New Orleans. So there's a history, you see what I'm saying? And of course you guys know ours. But if you don't know their history and they're on TikTok or even writing a book, it's okay if they made it all up as long as they're honest about it, and that happens a lot.
Yeah. I think I do have one question on topic for you, Lilith, which is, as a witch, as somebody who identifies solely as a witch, like, I have no other monikers that really matter to me. And so if somebody is like a bad witch on TV, it doesn't have a direct impact on my life, really. This is not, we're so far past the satanic panic or whatever. But I do notice that the conversation around ATRs can have like actual effects on oppressed people, right? I mean, like, really terrible things can happen. Like when you had, evangelicals, killing people in Haiti, when you know what I mean? Like, it just has the stakes are so much higher, right? When you're talking about these things, particularly in places where there's religious bloodshed, which happens a lot in South America, religious fanatics in Brazil and everything like that. Do you think that it would be better to have more and more positive images of African traditional religion in media, even if that means you're going to get a lot of fluff and nonsense too? Or would you rather it continue to go back to being somewhat more secretive?
I took a workshop with Baba John Mason. He was one of the founders of the Yoruba Theological Seminary, which was one of the first, groups that started putting out books and stuff like that in the late 70s and 80s. So a very long time, right? He's still alive. He's still out there kicking and doing the work. And he said the reason we were secret was because that's where it was safe, and I still think that certainly the younger generation doesn't realize how unsafe it was. And I'm not sure if they realize how quickly it could possibly go back to that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's still aggression against Black people. There's still aggression against LGBTQ plus people. There's still aggression against anybody who's different, really, right? We're still having to suffer and deal with that, both from government and police and even sometimes just our own neighbors and things like that, So I think it is still dangerous. I hope it doesn't get so dangerous that we all have to go undercover. When my daughter was young, I couldn't tell anybody I was a witch. I'd go to the PTA thing and I certainly couldn't tell them I was a voodoo practitioner or a Santo practitioner because that was evil. And, they would have taken her away from me. But I also couldn't have said that I like to smoke weed. So it's a different world. But I always thought she'd have access to, abortion. And that seems to have been taken away from us. So I don't know. I hope it doesn't turn into the point where it's unsafe again to where we have to have it be secret. But it does still scare me. It does still scare me, some of this response that people get, this sort of public rise and ever widening divide between those of us who are on this side of things and those of us who hate us on this side of things, So if I was, talking to somebody who was young, I used to babysit a little girl who's wonderful. She's 12 years old now. She decided she's a witch and I'm sending her Silver's books and all these wonderful things, But if she asked me, should I keep it a secret? I'd probably say yes.
Well, it's interesting because, shifting that to a panel question, you could say the same thing about witchcraft. We look to our elders, and in a lot of ways, they did it with more class than that's being done today, but their whole objective was to make witchcraft positive within the public sphere of existence so that people like us, do you think I could have just been on a show dressed like this with a giant upside-down star on my neck, in the 50s? No, it would have horrified people. Everything about me would have horrified people back then. But, nowadays, yes, we can have, we have this because of them. So I think what Levi's sort of kind of smearing there is we have this effort in witchcraft. I think where we are now in witchcraft, it's like we want to maintain that. We want to say, no, we don't worship Satan. But here's the real scoop on the devil with us. Here's where you might get confused in history, things like that. So, and we want to continue to elevate the occult side and say there is a bit of darkness, there is a bit of power. This isn't a world religion. This isn't for everyone. This is for a select few people who are wanting to do this thing that we're doing. With voodoo in particular, I don't like it when everyone lumps the ATers all together because voodoo is its own thing, just like witchcraft is not the occult. It's its own thing. So in the religion of voodoo, you've had to do the same thing where you're trying to educate the public that it's not all curses, it's not Satan worship, it's literally a mirror that's happening here. Where are you in that movement? I think is what kind of Levi was getting at. Where are you in that movement? Are you still feeling like it's important to educate the general masses that voodoo is a positive religious experience? Or do you feel more like you've got to reel it in and say, well, we're not that positive?
That's the thing is have we went too far trying to make it be everybody's friend?
I think where I'm at now, and I'll probably get in trouble for this, is sort of trying to add it to things that are more mainstream. in the sense of, like my work with plants. Okay, I can have somebody come and want to hear about this plant or that plant or this plant and used in spellcraft, but I can also tell them at that time, this is traditionally used in this particular context in an initiatory tradition for these things. So if that's something somebody's interested in and wants to take further, then that's great. If it's something that they don't feel calls to them or wouldn't be right for them to study, at least now they know. The big thing that's really pissing me off lately is people keep sending me letters. I'm white, so I can't read your book, but is there anything else you'd recommend?
I wonder where they get
and
those ideas from.
What the hell? I mean, I had to learn, you were talking about it, going to the library. I had to learn Greek mythology. I had to learn, Celtic mythology. All of that I had because that's what was given to me in school and other places and things like that, So why shouldn't I, even the Force, even if it's not necessarily you're a white person or it's not in your immediate ancestry, it's still good to know the things that are public to know. So you're not ignorant. Like all of us were forced to learn these other things. So, but for me, it's more of I'm mainstreaming myself, maybe just to make more money or whatever, and then sneaking the voodoo in when I can.
Sneaking the voodoo in.
What about you, Ellie? What do you think? Do you think that witchcraft should continue? Do you think it's important that we still educate the masses, or do you think that we should reel it in?
I would probably say reel it in. I think the right people come to us. I don't like the idea that all the masses are going to become witches. I just don't like it. I want to be an elitist, and there's a few really wonderful witches on the planet, and we're some of them, and that very few people really get to do it.
What about you, Levi?
I don't know. I think it depends on the tradition. I think for, like I was talking with Lilith, I think with ATRs, there's a lot more at stake in certain places in the world. For witchcraft, I can only speak for my own thing, I would reel it in quite a bit. Or, to be honest, I mean, the cat's out of the bag. You can't reel it in.
No,
you know what
right.
I mean? The cat's out of the bag. The ship has sailed.
I think you can reel in our inner practices.
Yes, yes.
But where I think it's important, the conversation is, we can't get away from that anthropological Christian nuance of the word witch, where we're dealing with the very real thing of African children being killed right now as witches. They're not being killed for being, anything other than albinos, usually, I think it is, isn't it? The albino children, the ones that...
Yes.
Sometimes it depends on the area.
But they're being, people being killed for a Christian delusion that's still propagated in less educated parts of the world, and people are still being killed. Like, it's still happening. I think it was 10 years ago that they executed a woman in Saudi Arabia for witchcraft, cut her head off. That's not as big, obviously, there, but it's still happening. So the conversation, I think where you guys are, I think as far as like Alexandrian or Gardnerian, I think our inner practices, well, they've never really been put out there anyway, but the regurgitation stuff is something else now. But I still feel compelled to educate people that witches aren't something they should be afraid of, because I still think Christianity is one of the most dangerous religions on earth in certain geographies. That could be said about other religions where they're still violent. And I could see in the Trump era the possibility of this country shifting in a way where people who practice witchcraft or people who practice voodoo or gay people or women, we were all sort of comparing it to that movie where the women have to wear the Handmaid's Tale. Could it happen? I think it could.
I agree. Your daughter is on the line, but we only have 8 minutes, so
we can go a little bit over because I have to plug her, and
yes,
and then we'll go. Yeah. Last question though.
Harriet coming in right under the wire.
Harry Rat.
Hello. Oh my gosh, 4 of my favorite people all on the same show. You guys don't even know how excited it's been for me. I hate to jump away from where we were because very important topic, but actually I'd love to bring music into this because it is media and it's a big part of magic, We're not only talking about sound, but if we're getting into the topic of like pop media and secular music, and I'm trying to throw my mom a bone here, what kind of music do y'all feel like has helped you pull into your magical self, or are there songs or bands or things in the pop world that are offensive to you because they give the wrong idea or they're misrepresentative?
That's so funny, Harriet. You know I don't listen to the radio or any pop music, and I don't know who any musicians
Well, we
are
did
today.
listen. We listened to like Led Zeppelin and the Rolling Stones. There's a
Rage
lot of
Against the
magical
Machine.
information in there. Jimi Hendrix, Mom,
Jimi
Voodoo Child. You know,
Hendrix,
you got it.
yeah.
You got it. Harriet says. You got it, girl.
But we had it on records, right?
Yes,
We had it on records.
we did. Yeah, I like to tell people we had a record player and a rotary phone, and that was about it.
Oh, that was so sweet. I thought you were going to tell the story about how I caught you watching the little black and white TV in the middle of the night and you weren't allowed to, and I made you throw it out the window and never.
That is true.
You told that to
That is a
Brian.
true story.
You
I
told
did have
that
to throw it out the
Brian.
window myself.
After being made to promise.
Promise never to turn it on again. It's of the devil.
That's right.
Of the devil.
No brainwashing. Yeah,
I
there's a
forgot
witch
about it.
telling you to stay away from the devil. Y'all just think. No, I'm just kidding. But I would love to hear from everybody. I know Lilith has some good information here.
I'll
too.
be very
So
quick.
What do you guys
I
like?
don't have anything music-wise that I feel negative about, really, honestly.
Okay.
I feel negative about Meghan Trainor, but I don't think that's spiritual.
About
I either like it or I don't, but I don't have any songs or anything I could think of that, sing about witchcraft or the occult that I flat out hate. There might be some like really hardcore stuff where I can't understand the words, but I don't know.
I don't. I'll be pushed away for this completely, but I don't like Stevie Nicks at all.
Uh-oh.
Never.
Some people are going to email you some mean
I
things.
know. I'm
just
sorry.
gonna let you know.
I don't really like women singers that much, and I definitely don't like Stevie Nicks. Music. I don't know her personally, of course.
I don't know personally, of course. Jesus.
I wish I knew Jimi Hendrix in person.
I'll be
Definitely.
very, very brief, Harriet. I think it depends on the situation. I think I use music a lot for ritual. All of my circles have music in them. I always employ music. I mean, this is no shock to anybody. I like a lot of like classical stuff and like, Renaissance polyphony and Palestrina and Thomas Tallis and all that. That's my jam for religious music. But not, if you're talking about pop music, I love an 80s female ballad. So like the bad ones, like, Gloria or, Heaven, what is Belinda Carlisle. You know what I'm talking about? Like, I love, like, I will have
Sheena Easton.
Yeah, I'll have a full Belinda Carlisle moment. Do you know what that's worth? Heaven is a place on earth. Like, I will have a full moment with that. Or Juice Newton, Angel of the Morning. Like, if I'm not listening to Palestrina.
This is like my drunk playlist.
I'm just going crazy.
I'm not kidding, Harriet. If I want to talk to God, and the Palestrina isn't working, then it's going to be, and the goth music from the 80s that I secretly love isn't working, it's probably going to be Belinda.
Oh.
Right. And last but not least, Lilith.
Oh, okay. I got a lot. I think voodoo music, the best I would say at the moment that's here in town, fortunately enough, because they're kind of exiled from Haiti, is Ram Haiti. They're one of the oldest Haitian bands, and they're here. They're not that far from me. They're over near you, Ellie.
Yeah.
They're on the other side of the canal.
I think they practice two
but
doors
they've
down
been in town.
from me.
You should come with me. Okay. They've been in town for the past 6 months. They're going to be here for some time longer. So that's really wonderful to have one of the most famous voodoo bands in the world here in New Orleans with us. And but I think I don't know, the ones I don't like. I wish I could have seen Jimi Hendrix. We did a tribute to Hendrix at Tipitina's once, and I was the official priestess. That was a great gig.
Ooh, yeah.
I got to be Voodoo Child up on stage. Obviously, Dr. John. I could not say enough about Mac and all of his music, and bringing voodoo back into pop music and jazz and all of those things. So there's a lot. My priestess, Bonnie Devlin, she used to drum with Ola Tunji. She was amazing. And our dear friends, the Dragon Ritual Drummers.
I was going to say the drummers. We love them.
Very good. Oh, very good.
We do love them.
All right, Lilith. So we're running out of time. So
Thank you, Harriet.
Thank you,
please,
Harriet.
Thanks, Harry Rat.
Thank you, Harriet.
Please tell us how people can find you and what your most recent projects are.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm working on a new book, but it's still a secret. But I can say it's about tarot, so that's exciting. That'll be out next year. And my most recent book was actually The Voodoo and African Traditional Religion by Warlock Press. So that was a complete redoing of an earlier work that I had done. It was completely updated and graduated into a whole new stratosphere. I talk about movies, I talk about music, I talk about all the different religions in that book. So that's fascinating. You can find me on social media, Lilith Dorsey. You can find me on my website, lilithdorsey.com. I have the most popular voodoo blog in the world, Voodoo Universe. So you can check that out. And come and see me at Jazz Fest next year because I'm the garden designer again.
I'm excited to see what that's about. So next week's episode will be our last episode until we're going to take a break for a couple of months because of October and travel, because I'm going to the UK after October. I'm not sure if Ellie's going yet or not, but we've got traveling and things going on. So we will be probably starting up against December. So our 8th episode of season 4, our ambush interview will be conducted by Alex. I don't know how to say his last name. I want to say Gagne?
I don't know how he says it.
Gagne? How do you think it's?
Gagne in French, but I don't know.
I don't know. Alex Gagne, I don't know. He's a.
We're doing great.
A friend. I can't. I've never said his name.
I know. We usually read it.
He'll tell us later. Anyway, he's amazing. He's a Gardnerian high priest from New York, one of Lilith's old stomping grounds, and he is active in a Gardnerian coven there, and he will be conducting our interview. We're very excited. He's very smart. He's in the theater, and he's just adorable.
Okay.
You'll love him.
All right.
But anyway, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Lilith, for the wonderful topic and the great night. And I wish you all well and see you next Thursday.
Yay.
Bye,
Bye, everybody. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Lilith.